You are listening to the Fantasy IPA podcast.
Can't wait. It's time to go eat, baby.
Your audio hangout for the latest intel, projections, and analytics.
Hey, we are playing to win. I'm in a league of my own. Ain't ready for me.
Visit us at fantasyipa.com and follow us on Twitter at fantasy_IPA.
Let's do this.
Welcome to another special edition of the Fantasy IPA podcast, where we're bringing you the third matchup in our series called the Fantasy Face-Off. Really excited for this matchup today. Before we get to our competitors, I'm going to kick it over to Jamie. Jamie, why don't you say hi to the audience and tell them where to follow you?
Hey everybody, happy to be here again. Face-Off number 3, you can follow me at FIPA_Black. I'll kick it back to Art to introduce our very special guest and our very unspecial guest for this evening.
Yes. So let's start with our special guest from DFF, or Dynasty Football Factory. We've got Jeremy Funk. Jeremy, you want to say hi? Tell everyone where to find you?
Hey guys, like you said, my name is Jeremy. You can find me at DFF_Deuce, like the number 2. I'm happy to be here, guys.
Yeah, we're definitely happy to have you. And if you guys haven't read anything by Jeremy, I'd encourage you to go do a search for him on DFF. In particular, the last article that I read was titled "Why Analytics Suck." Lovely title there, Jeremy. But what I really loved about this article is instead of analysts coming on and telling you who to go pick, this is more around the strategy and how you should approach certain analytics and why some of them can be misleading. So in a sense, you're teaching your readers how to fish. So really good stuff. If you haven't seen it, go check it out and check out all of his really good work. Great follow on Twitter. And our other competitor, you guys know him. He's been on the podcast before. He is from Fantasy IPA, John Bray. How's it going, John?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty unspecial, pretty unloved, but otherwise I'm good.
Yeah, and make sure you're following John at FIPA_Bray. And as usual, please follow us on the site at fantasy_IPA and visit us at www.fantasyipa.com. Well, as I mentioned, this is our third episode, but I'm going to go ahead and frame up the exercise here for our competitors. There will be 3 rounds within this fantasy face-off. We'll start with 2 rounds of alternate listings where I'll give you guys a category, and all you have to do is name the player, the team, or other that fits into that category. We'll go back and forth until one of our analysts get their second strike, where at that point, that analyst has a big opening to complete the list and build up a big lead there. In our third round, and our final round, which is the speed round, we'll give you 7 questions and 30 seconds to answer them in rapid-fire fashion. So if there's no questions, I will go ahead and jump into our first question set, guys. All right, and we're going to start this one. We're going to start off with our special guest, Jeremy, on this one. But the question here is, between 2012 and 2016, there have been 10 players to amass over 1,800 all-purpose yards not all-purpose yards. There have been 10 players to amass 1,800 yards from scrimmage. So that is rushing and receiving. Return yards do not count. So since 2012, there have been 10 players that have amassed over 1,800 yards. If there's no questions, we'll kick it over to Jeremy. Do you have a first guess for us?
I'm going to go with Adrian Peterson.
That is correct. And Adrian Peterson actually shows up as number 1 on our list. In 2012, he did hit 2,300 yards from scrimmage, and that was a pretty kind of a softball there for Jeremy, and that I think we all know that he went over 2,000 yards that year. So, but that's how this game works. You got to knock out the easy one. So great job there, Jeremy. All right, and that kicks it over to John. John, who's your first guess?
1,800 yards in a single season. Total yards, right? That's the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to go with Jamal Charles as my guess.
School break. Yeah, I forgot to frame this up pre-game, but certain answers are going to trigger a school break where I'm going to ask our special guests here to drop some knowledge. So quick tidbit on Jamal Charles. He actually did amass 1,980 yards in 15 games. So that isn't the question. That's a tidbit. But Jamal Charles is coming off his second ACL tear. He turns 30 in December. Spencer Ware, Charkandrick West both showed very well last year. There's been talk of a reduced workload for Jamal Charles. So he's also going at number 17 in Fantasy Football Calculator, or round 2, pick 5. So how are you guys handling Jamal Charles?
Well, I know I'm a pretty staunch zero running back supporter. So, I mean, I like him generally speaking. I think if he comes back from the ACL, which he's shown he can do, I think he's an easy running back one. But I think how 9-year-old second ACL injury, it's not somebody around that I'm looking to mess with, I guess. I think it could hit. It's great, but long term, he's not the answer for me. I'm much more interested in maybe a David Johnson at that range, or I don't even know. I think I would be willing to have Deion Lewis, to be honest.
All right. How about you, John? I know we've talked about Jamal Charles, but where do you stand on Jamal Charles as of today?
Yeah, I think he's an amazing athlete, and I know he works hard. But I have no doubt he'll be back to near full strength. But like I said on a previous podcast, my biggest concern is really just usage from the coaching staff and the upstairs management. That with what Charkandrick West and Spencer Ware showed last year, that there's really no reason to run him out there for 80% of the carries and touches. So I think that they're just going to spell on it, and they anticipate team and wanting a Charles at that point. So I really think it's just more a usage problem from fantasy perspective than anything else.
So is he someone that you're passing on at 205 like Jeremy?
Probably so. Yeah, I'm a little lower on him from his current average draft position.
Thanks for that, guys. Let's move on to our next guest, and it's over to you, Jeremy. Who do you got?
I'm going to say Arian Foster.
Yeah. And, I think...
how close was he?
I'm sorry. In 2012, he had 1641, but before that, he did have a couple of seasons where he amassed 1,800 yards.
Yeah, so Arian Foster's definitely a great guess, just not within the last 4 years, although, as Jamie noted, in 2012, which is our cutoff, he did amass 1,641 yards. All right, so...
solid guess, though, Jeremy. I liked him as well.
And as we've seen in previous episodes, one of the best things to have is your opponent take one of your wrong guesses. So definitely good thanks there for John. So let's kick it back over to John. John, who is your next guess?
Well, as you all know, I drink a lot, so I tend to forget things. But my recent memory is rather good. So 2015, I know there was a huge wide receiver explosion from a particular guy we know as Antonio Brown. Tell me he got a couple of reverses or had that on receiving yards alone?
Yeah.
He did.
Yes.
Okay, good.
He did amass 1,862 yards, and he is the first receiver that we've had a correct guess on, so very good. All right, that brings us back to you, Jeremy. One strike, so make sure you get a good one here.
Now you got my heart pumping. God, the adrenaline's on. I can't let John beat me.
Yeah, because I talk a lot of smack.
This might be the most boring smack talk thus far. Yeah, well, you're nice too. I'm gonna say Matt Forte.
Yeah,
very good.
Matt Forte, and we should actually give you a bonus point because Matt Forte, one of our virtual bonus points that we referred to. But Matt Forte is actually the only person between 2012 and 2016 that shows up on this list twice. In 2013, he amassed 1,933 yards total. And then again in 2014, he was up to 1,846. So definitely a very strong guess there, Jeremy. That kicks us back over to John. John, who's your next guess?
Oh, gosh. So it's clear running backs probably have the edge here by and large. I'm trying to think of other huge wide receiver seasons. I'm going to go with the recently retired. I mean, going back to 2012, that covers 3-4 years. So I'm going to guess Megatron and say Calvin Johnson had an 1,800-yard season in there.
He did, and
Nice.
also...
Yeah, and John, if you remember, in 2012, that was his big blow-up year where he came only 36 yards shy of that 2,000 mark, that ever-elusive 2,000 receiving yard mark. So Calvin Johnson made it in barely as far as the timeline goes. But yeah, Jamie rang the school bell, so that means we got to break down and drop some knowledge. So Calvin leaves Detroit. They bring in Marvin Jones. Golden Tate is the incumbent wide receiver starter there. These two players are very far apart in ADP. We've got Golden Tate going in the end of the third round, around pick 36. Marvin Jones at pick 89, or the beginning of the 8th round. So how do you guys see this receiving core playing out in Detroit? John, what's your insight in the receiver situation over there?
Oh, I think Golden Tate's going to be in for a huge year. I think he's being drafted a little too low. When Calvin Johnson was out of the lineup last year, I know that he performed very, very well. And he's not the most dynamic receiver per se, but he's a crisp route runner with good hands and understands the game. So I think that they're going to reach points in that offense where they're just going to have to play small ball, a little bit of dink and dunk with Theo Riddick, Golden Tate, even Abdullah out of the backfield. And so I think Golden Tate's good in that 10 to 15 yard range, and he's just going to get a ton of short targets and turn into a big monster fantasy year as a result.
Yeah, so according to John, very good value at pick 36, and if you have to reach for him, it will pay off. How about you, Jeremy? What is your take on the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think what John said was just on point. I think I'm buying Golden Tate over Marvin Jones just solely based on the fact that you know what you're getting. And look, Golden Tate, I think people don't realize that Golden Tate had a terrible yards per target, but he was a yards after the catch monster. And if Matt Stafford has shown us anything, it's that he's a one read quarterback, in my opinion, a stare down one receiver and throw it no matter what kind of guy. So, I mean, I have Golden Tate on almost every team. And that's just because I think he can easily catch 100 balls. He catches everything that comes his way, and you know what? He fights for yards. And yeah, he might not be the most physically gifted player, but I think when we touched on Antonio Brown, or just a guy that just knows how to play the game, knows how to fight, knows the mental side. So I would put all my eggs in that basket.
Thanks for that. Looks like John and Jeremy are aligned with the value over there in the Detroit wide receiver situation. So at this point, we've already named Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, Calvin Johnson, and Matt Forte. Jeremy, you do have one strike, but let's go to you for your next guess.
I listened to the DLF Filmetrics the other day, and they talked about Shady McCoy having a 2,000-yard season. So pretty confident in Shady McCoy.
In 2013, he did post 2,146 yards, and that was the first year that Chip Kelly took over. And as you can hear, you hit another school break here, so we're going to break down and drop some knowledge. So, as mentioned, McCoy did post the 2,000-yard season in Chip Kelly's first year. One of the hardest players this offseason to put a finger on is Carlos Hyde. He's been working on his cardio, anticipating a huge workload that's very fast. But there is talk about, Sean Drawn eating into his receiving work. Hyde right now is going in the 4th round at 408 or pick 44. For this really polarizing player, what is your take on it? We'll start with you, Jeremy.
I think he had that one game that we all just kind of is just lamented in our mind of that spin move against, I think it was the Steelers or maybe the Vikings, one of those two. But man, I just can't get behind Chip Kelly. I mean, they're not going to be winning any games. If analytics shows us anything, it's that quarterback play and defense play have such a positive correlation with output of running backs, and I just can't get behind him. I think there's something about him that, I sold him for DeMarco Murray in a first this year. So just something about that situation to me says run away. He's not going to get the workload, and he's kind of shown he's got these knick-knack injuries that kind of linger into the season. So I'm just not a big fan of running backs as a whole. So maybe I'm not the right person to ask. So maybe Jonathan will be able to help with a little bit better than I would.
Yeah, what do you think, John? Are you buying, selling on Carlos Hyde?
Oh, it's such a conundrum. It's like the yin of, the perfect situation with Chip Kelly as a running back, and the yang of he's a slow plotter from Ohio State, overrated because he played in the Big Ten, smash mouth. I go back and forth, and there's absolutely zero chance he's going to join this 1,800-yard list for next season. But I'm buying him when he slips far enough, which for me is, well into the third, fourth round, probably the fourth actually, and maybe even fifth round. But I'm not reaching for him ever. I think his opportunity is astounding, but the fact that he got hurt, on top of that, I'm with Jeremy on a lot of that and tending to stay away by and large, but I will jump just because of the opportunity. I think the Chip Kelly offense gives plenty of receiving options for the running back, and so that's a little bit intriguing.
Yeah, he's exciting. I mean, it's an intriguing play. I mean, it's a high risk, high reward kind of situation, so I can understand why somebody would be really high on him.
Yeah, and I think the other positive is the fact that Chip Kelly's offense tend to run a ton of plays, so that could work in his favor. And Jeremy mentioned the Madden spin move that he put on the Vikings in Week 1 of last year. If he can just do that like 3 or 4 times per run, 3 or 4 times, he might be okay. So, all right, that's going to do it for that breakdown. Let's move back over to John with your next guess.
All right, so I'm keeping one pick in my pocket that I'm hoping Jeremy doesn't think of, and I just kind of have the inside scoop on. But I'm gonna go with a monster season 2 years ago, hurt last year, and say Le'Veon Bell between his rushing and receiving maybe got to 1,800.
He did.
Yeah, he blew right past it at 2,200 yards. 2,215 yards. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
But yes, Le'Veon Bell is a correct answer. So that only leaves us with 3 more correct answers. You guys are doing very well. Jeremy, who's your next guess?
Julio Jones.
Julio Jones. He is the third receiver on this list, and he did post it in 2015 with all 1,870 yards coming from the receiving game there, I believe. But yes, Julio Jones is the correct answer. No?
And yes, and by the way, going back to that Le'Veon Bell question, Art, it was 1,361 rushing yards and 854 receiving yards that did it for him.
800 receiving.
Yes.
Good gosh, I didn't realize it was that many.
Very good year. All right, that leaves us with just 2 more correct answers. John, who you got?
Well, I know one of them. I have 0 clue on the next, but I know one because I'm a homer and a huge Cowboys fan living in the heart of Dallas. So I know that DeMarco Murray was out of his mind in the same year that Le'Veon Bell had a huge total yard season. Most of Murray's yards were rushing, but he might have eclipsed 1,800 on rushing alone. So DeMarco Murray?
Very good insight, and you're right. He did post 1,845 rushing yards. He finished with 2,261 total yards, only second to Adrian on this list. So DeMarco Murray is a correct answer. And
now I'm out of guesses. Completely.
One thing I noticed here with Murray is that he had 449 touches. So very, very big workload there. All right, so that brings us back to Jeremy. Jeremy, can you name the last person on this list?
I'm gonna take AJ Green.
Very good guess, but AJ Green did not make this list.
In 2013, he came in at 1426, but I believe that's his best season.
So he came close in 2013 with 1,426, but he also posted 1,388, 1,297 in 2015. So very reliant on the touchdowns and the presence that he brings. Not necessarily a yards monster, but as we're talking about 2016, there's a lot of people out there that think he will be joining this list. But But that does it for you, Jeremy. That is your second strike. And now, since we're only down to one answer, that'll give John 2 shots at getting this last person. So, John, who is your first guess?
I mean, I'm just racking my brain. I cannot think of another running back that gets the rushing and receiving combination that is necessary. So I'm going to have to go with a high-end wide receiver. I mean, the thing is, Odell Beckham and he missed too many games. There's no way he clipped that mark. So I'm going to go with someone who's been pretty steady for a number of years and had Peyton Manning throwing him the ball, and Demaryius Thomas, perhaps.
Oh, I'm sorry. Demaryius Thomas came close in 2014 with 1,619 yards. But other than that, he's pretty steady at the 1,400 to 1,300 range. But Demaryius Thomas did not make this list. Good guess, though, and you've got one more shot.
I'm going to go with another receiving running back. There's no way he got enough yards, but he's had 2 huge seasons, and he hadn't been in the league that long. I'm going to go Doug Martin.
Gosh dang it.
No. Are you serious?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Doug Martin.
I wouldn't call him a receiver.
His rookie year, right?
Yeah.
And everyone seems so disappointed.
Oh my god.
John, you were talking about Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch has come close twice. Yeah,
Has he really?
Receiving yards. Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't get enough receiving yards, I didn't think.
Just
Doug Martin.
barely. Just barely.
Doug Martin did it.
Yeah, so very good, guys. You actually answered all of the you guys completed this entire list, but Doug Martin, in his rookie year, monster season with 1,454 yards rushing, and then yards from scrimmage at 1,926. Well, that does it for the first round. And actually, to wrap this round up, we do have a school break. So each year, a new player has joined this list. That is amassing over 1,800 yards rushing and receiving combined. If you had to put your money on one person who wasn't named, who's going to join this list in 2016, who would it be? Please take your time. Let's start with Jeremy.
I think this is going to be kind of a hot take.
We endorse hot takes.
You know what? I am looking at this list of running backs, and I don't know that anyone has a better, clear path to an 1,800-yard season than Jonathan Stewart, maybe. I mean, he's got a QB that stretches the field, that dumps it off a lot to him. Jonathan Stewart, when healthy, is pretty good. From what I remember, eye test. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think he can catch. I think he's shown that he can rush for 1,200 yards easy. I can't really think. Maybe outside of the easy choices like Todd Gurley or Zeke, but I think if I'm looking zero running back, I'm going to say Jonathan Stewart.
Well, we like that you decided not to take the easy answers there, Jeremy. So if Jonathan Stewart hits it this year, we'll definitely play this audio back for all the doubters out there. Really good hot take there. How about you, John? Do you have a name that you think might join this list in 2016?
Well, I'd like to be a homer again, but considering I already bashed Ohio State a little bit, I can't go with Zeke. But he is tempting. So really for me, it's between 2 guys. I would say David Johnson and Lamar Miller, both decent receiving backs, actually good receiving backs. That will stand to get a lot of workload this year. I'm going to go ahead and go with David Johnson. The way he ended the year last year, the guy's explosive. If he would have played, the 6 games out for 18 last season, he would have crushed 1,800 yards. So let's go with David Johnson for my guess this year.
Yeah, pretty good take there. I think, like you said, John, if you extrapolate his starts, he's going to crush that number and get way over the 1,800 mark. So that's going to do it for round 1. And you guys, I do believe that this is the first list ever completed. So congrats to Jeremy and John. Let's move on to round 2. But before we do that, Jamie, where's the score stand right now?
Jeremy 4, John is 6.
Jeremy at 4 and John is 6. So still anyone's ball game here. So we'll move into round 2, where we're going to start with you, John. The question here, guys, is quarterbacks with the most top 12 finishes throughout the season. The scoring is normal quarterback scoring with 4 point for touchdown, 2 point for interception, 6 point for a rushing touchdown. There were 10 quarterbacks that finished with 8 or more QB 1 week. So in 2015, there were 10 quarterbacks that had 8 or more QB 1 weeks. And all you have to do is name them. Let's start with you, John. Who's your first guess?
The easy answer, Cam Newton.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yep, Cam Newton, he did finish with 10. He actually was not the leader on this list. So, I hearken back to one of Jeremy's articles where he talks about the tricks that averages can play on. And that's probably going to come to the forefront here as we talk about startable weeks versus where they finished. But Cam, as the number 1 quarterback, finished with 10 QB1 weeks. That brings us over to you, Jeremy. Who's your first guess?
Pains me to not choose Andrew Luck here, being a Colts fan, but I'm going to have to take his buddy from his draft class and say Russell Wilson.
Very good answer. Russell Wilson obviously had a very strong finish. And within the entire season, he actually had 9 QB1 finishes. So, John, let's kick it back to you. Who's your next guess?
Yeah, this seems like an easier question than the first one on the surface, but I have a feeling we may not finish this list out like we did the first one.
This is going to be tough.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Since he was never suspended and he was Angry Tom all season long.
There we go.
Tom Brady for me.
Yes, Tom Brady comes in at the top of this list with 11 QB1 finishes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so although he finished as the number 2 quarterback, he seemed to be one of the more startable. He did lead this list, so Tom Brady comes in. All right, that kicks us back over to you, Jeremy. Who's your next guess?
So I'm going to go Blake Bortles.
Yes. Yeah, Blake Bortles was one of the people at the top of the list. Yeah, he actually finished with 10 QB1 games. Now, this is also a school break. No worries.
I missed the school break.
All right. The heavy sentiment right now in the fantasy community is that Bortles will regress. He's actually, despite finishing as the number 4 quarterback, going on average as the 8th quarterback off the board and into the 7th round. So we'll start with you, Jeremy, who rode him to a championship. Do you see Bortles regressing, or can he repeat what he did last year?
You know what? I do think he can continue what he did. And that's for one reason. I think that defense appears to be better than it is. I watch their games all the time. I have a really good friend who's a Jags fan, and we talk Jags all the time, and the offense goes through Bortles. And just because he might be inefficient or he might throw too often, we don't really know what the mean is. So this argument that, he's going to regress, we don't really know what his mean theoretically is. So could he put up the same numbers? Absolutely. And I don't see why not. So I think for his ADP, yeah, I would buy there. I mean, I think he's almost locked to be a quarterback 1. You can't ask for much more than that.
How about you, John? Where are you at with Blake Bortles?
If they've stabilized the defense and the running game, theoretically he should pass less volume-wise. But Alan Hearns is his guys. He's dealt with his allergy to grass. So just think about that. This guy was allergic to grass playing NFL football, and now he's recovered. You got Allen Robinson. You got Julius Thomas healthy. You've added a running back. The offensive line's improved. This offense is going to hum this year if everyone stays healthy. So Blake Bortles is going to continue things pretty close to where he was last year.
Thanks for that insight on Bortles. That brings us back to you, John. We got Tom Brady, Blake Bortles, Cam Newton, and Russell Wilson named. That does give us 6 more to go.
So this is my favorite quarterback in the best ball format because he's so volatile to me. I'm going to go with Drew Brees. He will throw 5 touchdowns half the weeks and 1 the rest.
What?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, Drew Brees
he didn't even
not
make top 10. Dang.
Yeah. Now, this is interesting because I referred to kind of the averages piece, and, once again, check out Jeremy's article. But while Drew Brees finished as the number 6 quarterback, he only had 7 QB1 games. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't startable, but, big surprise for me as well that Drew Brees did not have 8 QB number 1 games. So
that shocks me.
So, John, that gives you your first strike. Jeremy, big opportunity. Let's capitalize. Who's your next guest?
I'm going to go with my boy BA. Carson Palmer had a heck of a year last year. And I don't even know if this is right, but I'm just assuming based on how much they threw the ball last year. So,
very good.
Yes. Palmer, who finished as the number 5 quarterback, had 9 QB1 weeks. And Jeremy, when you said BA, what does that stand for?
Bruce Arians.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was thinking badass, or because you were talking about Colin Palmer, but yes, Carson Palmer definitely shows up on this list with 9. That brings us back to you, John. You are on the edge with 1 strike. Let's see if you can get another one to stay in this round.
You've shattered my confidence. Drew Brees. How do you not have Drew Brees?
I would have guessed that if you
amazing.
Have, so.
Holy cow. I guess if I'm going to go down burning, I'm going to go down burning with Drew Brees followed by Aaron Rodgers. I know he did not have a great season by his standards, and I know he missed Jordy Nelson tremendously, but tell me Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers did not both make it outside the top 10.
No, they didn't. You got it right.
Lost
thanks,
my
Jamie.
mind.
God, you scared me.
I would have lost my mind there. That would have been 2 for 2 that I thought you stole from me, but
jeez.
Yeah, so Aaron Rodgers did make it. Now he was barely there with only 8 QB1 weeks, and I think that's a testament to the quote unquote struggles for Aaron Rodgers last year, where we're used to seeing him, leading the league in QB1 week. So, but Aaron Rodgers did make it in, and looking to bounce back in 2016. That brings us back to you, Jeremy. Who's your next guess?
Okay, I'm going to go Ben Roethlisberger.
I think he was hurt. He was hurt too much, right?
Really?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because he did miss games, but he still barely missed this mark with 7 QB1 weeks. But Ben Roethlisberger did not make this list.
Yeah, he played 12 games, but did come very close to making the list. So.
Yeah, so if he played one more game, I'm sure he would have made it. But, John, that brings us back to you. Both of you have 1 strike now. Pressure's definitely on. Who you got, John?
Well, and how many have we guessed out of the 10?
You guys
6.
have guessed
6 of the 10, so 4 more. Oh, there's some chintzy guy like Eli Manning or Phillip Rivers. Weren't they traded for each other once upon a time? It's going to be one of those 2, maybe both. But there's both on the fringe. Or some guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Sorry, Jeremy, I'm just giving you ideas left and right.
I'm writing them down, actually.
Yeah.
Great strategy, John.
I'm not even joking. I'm like,
So it wasn't a Texans quarterback. It wasn't a Broncos quarterback. I'm pretty sure of that. Or a Cleveland quarterback. Maybe Derek Carr. I'm going to go with one of the chintzy guys. I'm going to go with Mr. Catch Fire and score tons of points and win a fantasy game with Antonio Gates, Phillip Rivers.
Yes. Phillip Rivers made the cutoff with 8, and if you didn't catch it, John had to get his shot on Cleveland in somewhere in this podcast.
Every podcast.
Yes. So yes, Phillip Rivers finished with 8, despite finishing as the number 12 quarterback. So once again, kind of a highlight on where those accumulated points don't necessarily translate to startability, but Phillip Rivers, 8 games. Let's go back to you, Jeremy. We've got 3 more correct answers here. Can you give me one of them?
I'm going to go with Andy Dalton.
Oh my God, no.
And that's also
Oh my
never.
Yes,
school bell question.
the redheaded stepchild that gets no respect. And, you know, the amazing thing about Dalton is that despite everyone's view on him, he did finish with 9 QB1 games. And by the way, that was in only 13 games. So actually pretty efficient last year was Andy Dalton. But you heard the school bell, so we're going to break down and drop some knowledge. Dalton, who's going as the 15th quarterback. He loses Hugh Jackson. Zampese takes over. I'm not sure what that means. But what is your take on Dalton? Is he undervalued going at 11.05? Are you guys picking up any shares of Andy Dalton? We'll start with you, Jeremy, since you got him as the answer. What's your take on Andy Dalton?
I don't see why not. I actually don't own him in any leagues. I feel like he's not somebody that I often look to target. I think that's just because maybe I have this preconceived notion that he's not good. But I think if this is the second time where he's been a quarterback one, so I don't see why he isn't a buy. I think some of the other guys that are aging, I think he is a buy. I just never considered it before, so maybe I'm just being washed over by this newfound knowledge that you guys are giving me. But I don't see why not. He's got AJ Green, Tyler Eifert, Gio Bernard, potentially a solid player in Tyler Boyd that they drafted. So, man, I don't know. I think anything's possible with Hugh Jackson gone, and they could look to air it out. So why not?
Well, hey, and also to support you, Jeremy, pretty impressive that Dalton had 9 of those Week 1 finishes last year, and that was really basically in 12 games. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he gets the credit, that he deserves. He might not be one of the. He did have that top 4 finish that one year, but I mean, 9 Week 1 weeks and 13 starts, but in one of those starts he threw 5 passes before he left the game. So 9 Week 1 finishes and 12 complete games. Pretty impressive.
Yeah,
and he's got AJ Green. That's
yes.
Factor number 1. So he's got a top 5 wide receiver that he can just target downfield all day. So
yeah, and I hate to keep going back to this, but as you can tell, Jeremy, the article really hit me hard. But when you're talking about publication bias and how you can take a different look at things and make sure that you're not falling into the masses as far as where people's values are, I think Dalton might actually be one of those guys that falls into that category. But let's kick it over to John. John, what are your thoughts on Andy Dalton?
Well, as a reminder to the audience, I'm very unspecial tonight, but I'm going to dissent from every one of you guys. I don't like Andy Dalton this year. I think he's lost some weapons. He's got a lot to deal with. He's another year, another failure in the playoffs. Like, that's got to weigh on a man, right? I mean, look, I failed daily, and it weighs on me. So I can't imagine. I can't imagine Andy Dalton, dealing with another year in the books of not succeeding in the Cincinnati playoffs without Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu throwing to a rookie. He's going to feed AJ Green 180 balls, like, no doubt about it.
Easy.
And yeah, and now he's lost Hugh Jackson too. Like, I mean, there is so much change at work here. It's just a situation I'm going to avoid.
All right. Well, thank you for that, guys. Let's move on. There's only 2 more quarterbacks. John, can you name one of those 2?
I mentioned Ryan Fitzpatrick a minute ago, and maybe I'll go with him. I think it's a coin flip between him and Kirk Cousins. They both caught fire out of left field. No one expected it. I'm going to say that probably one of these 2 gets the last 3 spots, but I don't really know which. Ryan. I'm going to say, just based on the receiving talent that Ryan Fitzpatrick had, he had to have gotten 8 games. So, and Tyrod Taylor is kind of lurking in the back of my mind too. He runs for yards. Let's go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. 2 strikes.
No.
There you go, Jeremy. There you go.
No, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was close. He did end up finishing with 7 QB1 games, so narrowly missed the 8 QB1 games. Now that does leave the door wide open for you, Jeremy, with 2 correct guesses still on the table. Who's your guess?
I'm a huge fan of Matt Kelly, And this opens up for a moment to ask Matt Kelly to reconsider coming back on this podcast and challenging some people, because I joined.
Excellent.
I thought I was going to be able to challenge Matt Kelly to a duel of the minds, and he left. So,
and then you got stuck with me. Holy cow!
No, this has been awesome, John. It's got nothing to do with you. I was really excited. I wanted to get through the first round so I could face Matt Kelly, and he dipped. So you know what? I'm going to use Matt Kelly's guy and say, you like that? Kirk Cousins.
There you go. And
You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you, John, for framing that up. You love the softball.
No.
But yeah, Kirk Cousins did make this list. Now, he did have 8 number 1 starts, and he also finished as the number 8 quarterback. I think people might be surprised about that. Not only that, but I think Matt Kelly's chronicled, and if you listen to late round QB over there, JJ Zachariason, and they talked about the strength of his performance when it really mattered in the fantasy playoffs. So, Kirk Cousins has emerged as one of those players. But you did hear the school bell, and that's going to have us break down to drop some knowledge. So Kirk Cousins emerged and was actually one of the top producing QBs during the fantasy playoff. But he's going at 10.07 and the 14th quarterback off the board. Undervalued or going just right? Let's start with you, Jeremy, since you were the one that answered this question.
Yeah, I guess last time I didn't have very strong feelings, and this one I do. I own Kirk Cousins in every league but one, and just solely based on the fact that the guy's a jerk and he won't give me Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins for me, I think, is the Tony Romo of this generation of quarterbacks. Constantly kind of thought about in a different way. He throws the ball downfield. He's got fantastic targets right now with Jordan Reed, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but when he's out there, he's dominant. I love Josh Doxson. I think he's an ascending talent for him. I think it's going to be an amazing situation to get into. So, Deshaun Jackson's done nothing but produce wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 numbers for his career. I can't think of a better situation as well with defense. Their defense is terrible. And as an Indianapolis fan, bad defense equals amazing quarterback output. Like Peyton Manning doesn't score as much as he does throughout his career without having that terrible defense. I'm just going to push all in and say he's probably my top target at quarterback, and I don't think that lasts much longer after this year.
Yeah. So how does that sit with you, John? A Dallas Cowboys fan. We're pumping up a Redskin, but what are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins?
I cannot disagree. I mean, just that video of him, walking from the field to the locker room and how pumped he was. Like, I cannot let go of that. Like, that hangs on with me. That is me. Like, without the big nose, that is me. Like, that is exactly how I'd celebrate. So, I love that guy. I think he's going to have a huge season. He signed I think he signed the 1-year tender, right? And that's a ballsy, aggressive, confident move, and he's ready to go out and show what he can do. I'm all in on Kirk Cousins this year, same as Jeremy. Not necessarily to the same number of fantasy team exposures, but otherwise in the same game.
I have one more thing to say that I can't believe I forgot, and it's the fact that not only did he beat out the number 2 overall pick in RG3, like the owner propped up RG3 way longer than he ever deserved. And this guy, he persisted, and I'm sorry, like I'm a big motivational book guy. Like, this guy survived. He pushed and he's grown. Like, who knows how high this guy can go? I just think that he's shown so much more than people think.
He's a Tony Romo parallel, honestly.
Yeah, Jeremy, you kind of stole my thunder because I was going to jump in and say just the kind of I like to root for. He clawing and scratching and he held the clipboard and he's signing his tender. He's not holding out. So I'm pulling for him. Obviously I don't want him to do well against the Cowboys, but if he comes and shows well in this franchise year and comes out, he could be that next $100 million quarterback. So pretty interesting season for Kirk Cousins, definitely. But all right, Jeremy, so that gives us one more name on this list.
We have named correctly Blake Bortles, Tom Brady, Kirk Cousins, Andrew Dalton, Cam Newton, Carson Palmer, Phillip Rivers, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and then we have one more.
I think I never understood the hype last year. I never owned him. I never liked him. But I'm gonna have to say the legs probably helped him out a lot. And Sammy Watkins was dominant, so why not?
Tyrod Taylor's your answer.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you didn't get Tony Romo, you would have missed the same.
So Tyrod Taylor, very close at 7 games, but he did barely miss the cutoff. Now, John did mention, I think he said he was chintzy. Yes, so the last person on this list is Eli Manning with 8 QB1 games. All right, so that does it for round 2.
Does anyone care to guess how many different quarterbacks had a week 1 game in 2015?
Let's go 27.
27. How about you, Jeremy?
All of them.
Jeremy is closer than you, John.
How many?
Because,
tell them, Art.
I'll credit the guys that live in the stream because I was kind of on this and I had Jamie look it up. But 41 different quarterbacks had a QB1 week. And, when we're talking about averages and top quarterbacks, on the flip side, definitely want to throw out that stat to say that we're not in here trying to suggest that these are the guys you need to target, because streaming is definitely a legitimate option when you talk about that many quarterbacks that put up a quarterback 1 week. So pretty amazing. And that does bring up an end of round school break. And I'm going to put you guys on the spot because the question here for you is, gun to your head, who do you choose as who do you think will finish as the number 1 quarterback for 2016? Let's start with you, John. What's your guess there?
I'm going to go with Drew Brees. I think with Michael Thomas coming on board, Colby Fleener, I think Ben Watson was purely a product of Brees, and I think Fleener is a better version of Watson. Brees has him. He has Michael Thomas. He's got Brandon Cooks in his 3rd year. Things are really looking up for Drew Brees, and he wants to go out with a bang. Sean Payton, same thing. I'm going to go Drew Brees. How about that?
All right, you heard it here first. Drew Brees, number 1 quarterback. You guys can't see the video, but Jeremy was shaking his head the whole time. And I think I'm going to agree with you, Jeremy. So if I know where you're going with this, I think I'm in
Russell Wilson.
No.
Who's your quarterback 1?
Started by saying how much I really wanted to talk about Andrew Luck, but I couldn't. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm glad to be here. Andrew Luck alone, he's going to blow up stats this year. I just can't see a scenario where without him being injured, he just doesn't score. He's not the QB1. He's already done it. I think that year he averaged almost 30 points a game. He won people leagues and got people who had rebuilding teams into the playoffs. Yeah, he's got, literally, as a Colts fan, it pains me to say this again, we have no defense. Like, we have 38-year-old middle linebackers. What do you think's going to happen? He's going to throw 45 times a game. We have no pass game.
Until he gets hurt, and you still have no offensive line.
We do have an offensive line. I want to point that out. At PFF, we had the 15th best ranked offensive line. It's not the best, but it's mediocre, and it's kind of one of my hot button topics that it's an over talked about situation where we sucked. We just didn't have a center. And I
we had a
think
good relationship for an hour and a half, Jeremy.
Well, here we go. Let's do it. This talk about Dante Moncrief becoming this dominant player, I'm really not on board yet. Philip Dorsett, he's going to probably be like a similar to Deshaun Jackson, but T.Y. Hilton, he's the mainstay. He's going to have he's constantly open and mid-crossing routes, so I just can't see a world where Andrew Luck doesn't throw the ball 40 times a game and have 4 touchdowns regardless if he throws a lot of interceptions. It doesn't matter. He puts up touchdowns and he throws 300-plus yards, so you're getting your bonus every week. So I'm going to take that guy. I don't believe in Cam's touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. He's not going to have 8 rushing touchdowns again. So maybe Aaron Rodgers comes back and Russell Wilson continues to ascend, but I'm going to stick with the person that's already done it. So I'm going to say Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I said that I was probably going to agree with you because I knew where you're going. And if you follow me at all, you know that he's the guy I'm taking first in NFL 10s and whatnot. And I don't think Moncrief has to be a game breaker. I think he has to be considerably better than Andre Johnson was last year, and I think he was. I think it maybe underscored how much Johnson may have hampered that offense last year, soaking up targets and being very inefficient. So I'm with you there, Jeremy. I'm taking Luck as my number 1 quarterback moving forward. One
more time. No one ever talks about the fact that the Colts wide receivers were incredibly injured last year. Like T.Y. Hilton was on the injury report. We didn't know if he was going to start almost every game. Dwayne Allen, he was on the PUP but wasn't on the PUP. Like, we don't even know why he wasn't deactivated. They tried to bring him back and he just was injured. So this whole narrative that he just had a terrible year is not well thought out and researched by a lot of people. And Moncrief had a high ankle sprain and played on it. Philip Dorsett broke his ankle. Like, I mean, who knows what the ceiling is for that offense? So,
all right. Well, thank you guys for that information and your take on the number 1 quarterback. That brings us to the end of round 2. And Jamie, where do we stand?
Jeremy has 9. John has 10.
9 to 10. Definitely our closest match going into the speed round. So the speed round is going to be the determining factor here. And based on the fact that Jeremy is actually trailing by 1, I'm going to ask John to drop off, and we're going to add you back in just a minute, John. For this speed round, I'm going to name 7 players. I want you to tell me whether or not they eclipsed 2,000 yards from scrimmage ever in their careers. Yes.
Okay, I'm only 24. How far back are we going here? If you throw out Bo Jackson, I don't even know who that is. So, just kidding.
Well, I've got a couple from 2002, 2003. You okay there?
Maybe. I'll wing it. Let's see what happens.
And there's one super record breaker on here that's kind of a gimme. So.
Yeah. So.
All right. What'll happen is I'm going to name the player. You say over if you think he went over 2,000 all-purpose yards in his career in any given season, or say under if you think that he did not hit that. Okay. So Jamie, if you've got the clock set, we'll get this kicked off.
I do. Is everybody ready?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Now.
All right. Clinton Portis.
Over.
Emmitt Smith.
Over.
Chris Johnson.
Over.
Curtis Martin.
Over.
Maurice Jones-Drew.
Under.
Jamal Lewis.
Over.
Arian Foster.
Under.
So let's go over them real quick. So Clinton Portis, you answered no or yes, but he actually came very close at 1,905 yards, and that was surprising to me because Portis was kind of that dual threat. Yeah. Emmitt Smith definitely hit it at 2,148 in his better season. I think he had a couple seasons over 2,000. Chris Johnson, as you know, hit it with just rushing, but one of the main reasons why we kept him on this list is that he is actually the number 1 all-purpose yards from scrimmage at 25.09 in that historic season that he had. Curtis Martin, man, this was a tricky one. We threw it in here, but he came close at 1942. Maurice Jones-Drew, I thought he was tricky. He came very close at 1980, and he did not make it, and you got that one right. Jamal Lewis, as you know, he did eclipse 2,000 yards rushing, so he hit it, and he amassed 22.71. Arian Foster, as mentioned before, hit it with 22.21 in 2010.
That gives him 13. And
We'll see what happens.
All right, John. So Jeremy knocked it out of the park. He did end up getting 4 of the right answers, which puts you behind 13 to 10.
Why'd you tell him?
Oh, you're right.
Sure.
Wow, you didn't hear that. Erase it from your memory.
So, John, you need to answer 4 here to successfully take down this challenge. John, the category here, and this one is related to our first question, but the category here is players that have amassed over 2,000 yards from scrimmage in a single season. So what I will do is I will name 7 players. You'll have 30 seconds to say over or under. If you think the player had a season anytime in their career over 2,000 yards, say over. Or if you don't think they hit that mark, say under. Got it?
I think so. Under, over. That's all I have to say, right?
That's right.
yep,
And
30 seconds.
I can do that.
All right, go.
Clinton Portis.
Over or under 2,000 yards in a season? Good. And you got
John,
4
you have
for
30
4,
seconds.
Jeremy? God. Clinton Portis under.
Okay, Emmitt Smith.
I'm a homer and I might miss this. Over.
Chris Johnson.
Over.
Curtis Martin.
Under.
Oh, that is
Timer.
that is. John, did you not know that there was only 30 seconds for this round?
Did I answer all 4?
Oh, there was, John.
There were 7.
Oh, 30 seconds total. I thought you meant 30 seconds per question.
Yeah, so the first time in our Fantasy Face-Off history, we have a tie at the end of round 3. That's going to bring up our 4th round and our tiebreaker. This will be a number that you will have to give up, and I do see...
Number.
Yes.
All right.
Math?
Math.
Yeah. Wonderful.
All right.
I'm done.
So the question here for our tiebreaker is, it's a number, and what we want you to do is the total receptions between DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, and Antonio Brown. All right. And do we have John's answer? All right. So for the listeners out there, we've got John and Jeremy showing their numbers. John has guessed 337. Jeremy has guessed 405. Jamie, what is the correct answer?
383. John is off by 46.
So Jeremy comes in closest at 22. John was off by 46. That gives us a winner of this fantasy face-off with Jeremy Funk from DFF.
Good
Congratulations,
work, buddy.
Jeremy.
Good work.
John, that was awesome.
Outstanding. Yeah, that was fun, buddy.
Anytime, if you
I
want to do
enjoyed
it
it.
again, let me know.
So yeah, I can't thank you guys enough for being guests on this episode of the Fantasy Face-Off, disseminating knowledge among the fantasy football community. So I'm going to kick it over to you first, John. Any parting words for the crew or the listeners?
No, just that I wish my last name was Funk. Otherwise, it's been a good night. I'm pretty happy with it. Have a good night.
Right. How about you, Jeremy? Any parting words for the crew or the listeners?
It's been a lot of fun. I hope, if anybody needs any help with questions or anything like that, I'm sure John would share the same sentiment. Just shoot us a tweet. We'd love nothing more than to help a listener out. And yeah, I look forward to the next time when I square off against Matt Kelly.
Yeah, so thanks once again, and thank you again to all the listeners out there. Please make sure you go to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe. Once again, follow the site at fantasy_IPA. But that'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Face-Off. And until next time, make sure you get you some IPA.
Adios.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy IPA podcast. Visit us at fantasyIPA.com and follow us on Twitter at fantasy_IPA.
Hail to the king, baby.
To the house, baby.
Please subscribe and review at iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast provider.
Call trust. That's called trust.
See you next time, and until then, make sure you get you some IPA.
Come get some.
Get some. Get some. Get some.
We just want to say thank you for all the love.
And we're out.